Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining the JS Mindset Weekly Call. My name's Denny, and today is Saturday, September 7th, 2019. On the call are the boys, Jim Sinclair, Bill Holter, and the famous Dave. Well, August is over, but the craziness and volatility in the markets is not over. Rumors of a trade deal, first on, then off, then on again. Boris Johnson's drama to get Britain out of the European Union. The hurricane on the East Coast, and a couple of dozen other natterings. All of them are foreshadowing that these markets aren't going to settle down anytime soon. This last week we also saw gold and silver make great gains, only to be hammered down again. The good news, if there is any, is that the hammer downs aren't as effective as they once were, and the support levels for both gold and silver are really getting higher and higher. The four of us on this call today absolutely understand how frustrating it must be to all of you as listeners that we just haven't seen the great breakouts for metals. But we also know that as much as all of us would like to be finally proven to be correct in our selection of gold and silver, not just with our friends and families, that these are the primary investments, we have to be careful for what we wish for. When the day comes that gold and silver are once again in the primacy, the probability of a rough go of it in all aspects of everyday living, and things that just won't be good for the majority of population will clearly be there. In short, there will be some bad times for the nation and the world when gold and silver finally do break out. The whole idea of these weekly calls is just to give you some other things to think about. Your investments, your analysis of current events, certainly your glimpse of what things might look like in the not-too-distant future. But always remember, we are not giving you investment advice. We're trying to give you another perspective of economic world as we see it, just to add to your own perspective, just so you can be prepared for what might certainly be some very trying times ahead. As always, we truly appreciate and thank you for investing in the premium side of jsmindset.com. There you have access to Bill's writings, which to date are some of the clearest set of thoughts and perspectives on current financial events. You also get a chance to see Jim's and Dave's postings of things you just might miss in your own daily readings and interpretations of current events. Bill, I'm starting with you today. You recently published some data and charts. The exchange for physical contracts moved over to London. Those are just incredible statistics, and that combined with the MACD chart you posted on JS Mindset show that there's a heck of a lot going on. Can you sort of not just put the pieces together, but fill in the blanks for us?
Well, the EFP contracts, that is how COMEX has avoided a failure to deliver. They ship the delivery demands over to London, and that's completely opaque. You can't see it. You can't see whether they're actually being delivered upon. So far, just this year, in the first 8 months, so that's 2/3 of a year, there's been 4,200 tons of gold EFP'd, and there's been 1.6 billion ounces of silver EFP'd. Total global production of gold, minus Russia and China, is about 2,800 tons. So we're already, in gold, 50% more demand for delivered metal than is produced in a full year. In silver, total production is 750 million ounces, and they've already done 1.6 billion. So that's on pace to do 2.4 billion, which is more than triple what is actually pulled out of the ground. If nothing else, it shows the complete fraud that the paper markets are, because there's no way that amount of metal, and remember, it's just in 8 months, there's no way that amount of metal can ever be delivered. And then the other thing that we posted was the gold to silver ratio. You can see at the bottom of the chart, the MACD has crossed over to the downside. It's rolling over, and as that chart drops, that means that the gold to silver ratio drops, which means silver will become or is becoming more valuable versus gold. We got to 92, I think 92 or 93 to 1, which we'd only been to once That's the most extreme undervaluation of silver to gold in all of history. So basically what the chart says is you want to be much heavier in silver than in gold.
Jim, this week, BlackRock's chief investment officer, he's a fellow by the name of Rick Reeder, he warned that the end game is coming and central banks are going to debase everything to spark inflation. The point was that the central banks are much more concerned about deflation than they are inflation. Have you got any thoughts on that, Jim?
Back to the world of semantics. People have a very glib understanding, meaning they don't understand what inflation and deflation really means. And deflation is failure of financial instruments. Inflation is the product of attempting to keep economies underneath that still functional. So the order of march is deflation, inflation. And the basis of our thesis depends on the fact that we understand, and I think we're able to explain, that the gospel of MSM is a false gospel. Worry about deflation as something that will depress the price of gold and silver, while in truth, that's the key that will end up in non-delivery, which is already set up to be the key that will cause reset 1 and reset 2 will take place because of the market. And right now, all we have in the market is computers and hobbyists. And that's why you can go down on the Dow 700 points or NASDAQ is something huge, and the next morning open up 100 points because it's not real. So markets are deteriorating to the point of illiquidity of a massive size. Then you have the EFTs, illiquidity of a massive size, and how about the EFTs that own EFTs? More liquidity. How about the 2-to-1s and 3-to-1s? More illiquidity. The demon out there that most people think is negative for gold is the fact that we don't have the greatest economy ever on the face of the earth. That, in fact, every major economy of the world outside of ourselves, at least according to their figures, is slowing down and slowing down meaningfully. That MSM considers the way to get rid of Trump is to do reverse mope, which is watch out, the recession's coming. So that inflation-deflation argument, or Harry Dent's podium, as understood and preached by the grand priest, if he is of that, is totally backwards and a total misunderstanding. I believe that answers the question.
Hey, Denny.
Yeah, Bill.
Just one note on that. The very last word in that article was gold.
Yes. And coming from BlackRock's chief investment officer, that's a big statement.
That's a big 4-letter word.
Yeah, it begins with a G, so people, we're family rated here, you know.
Well, the point being, for the CIO of BlackRock to use that 4-letter word, gold, I was shocked to read the article.
It's all changed, Bill. Okay, we're not in a controlled substance anymore. By that I mean, an illegal substance. We're in that which will be the center focus of markets in a very short period of time, in my humble opinion.
David, if the end game for central banks is total monetary debasement, how do you think that'll play out in world affairs? If we get a high or even hyperinflation, how do you think China and Russia are going to react? Dave, I sort of get the feeling they've been waiting for the fiat currencies to just blow up before they make their next move. Have you got any thoughts about that geopolitically and geofinancially?
Well, yes, actually I do, and we talk about it quite a bit, and we've posted about it an enormous amount on who is collecting gold and who is not, is the best way to put it. And what better way to defeat your enemy than to never have to fire a shot. And, we've talked about this for several years now. I'm not looking for a conventional war. At least I'm hoping for one not to take place. And again, the reason is the MAD, mutual assured destruction. You'd have to be crazy to start a shooting war with a nuclear power. Pakistan and India, again, the world, as everybody knows, it ends the minute that takes place because you're unleashing a genie that cannot be put back in the bottle. So when you look at how is this war going to be fought, it would most likely be a financial war. And what better way to do that than to have a 100-year plan where you convinced every American to go in debt up to their eyeballs, to leverage everything they own 10 to 1, 20 to 1, then let it fail, and you have a situation where everything is bankrupt, you start the new currency, and you come in and buy whatever you want for, let's say, shavings of gold on the dollar. Not even pennies, just shavings. So you could defeat the whole West simply by showing that their Ponzi scheme is nothing but a Ponzi scheme backed by nothing. As Jim said earlier as we were talking amongst ourselves, we already have, for lack of a better word, cryptocurrency. And we've been told we have crypto treasuries because we've been told by our central bankers that they have something better than a printing press. They electronically print digits that we call money. They actually don't even have to print it. In Germany, they hailed when they came out with faster presses so that they could print more marks. Well, the central banks have already told us that they have the ability to create money electronically. Well, what is a cryptocurrency? So, as Jim stated earlier, and I'd like to make sure that I credit him for this, we have been functioning under one form of cryptocurrency called crypto treasuries. And when that game stops being played, I'm afraid that we are going to find ourselves in the argument of inflation and deflation, which Bill clearly pointed out, whether it was a week or two ago. It is when inflation is when the things you need go up in price. Deflation is when the things you have, like houses, cars, boats, airplanes, resorts, go down in value. And there's no clearer picture than that. Then you're looking at these IPOs of company like WeWorks. All of a sudden, they're going to cut the IPO in half. It's a $40 billion, $80 billion, $20 billion. They make these numbers up. Peloton's going to go public. It's never made any money. These companies that put the electric scooters out there, Bird and, the rest of them, they're valued at billions of dollars. Yet in the mining industry, we have mines that have known and proven reserves that are truly worth billions of dollars, but yet they can't catch a bid. Well, that tells you that the people in charge are hoodwinking the common folk into a misdirection play. So, to answer the question in a nutshell, we're going to see the trump card played sooner or later, and no pun intended, sometimes I honestly think, and not sometimes, I am convinced that Donald was put there because he is, just like everything he's run through bankruptcy. Well, right now he has the reins of the United States, and I see us defaulting, and we already have because we defaulted on the gold standard a long time ago. It's just a matter of when it happens, Denny. Bill, want to add to that?
No, that was good. You covered.
Let me put one in.
Everything.
The means of coming out of bankruptcy is to maximize that which is of value and dump that which is not. Okay? And the question is, do we really have any gold? That's a very interesting point that we may never know. And the second one is, treasuries are already crypto. You think anybody gets a treasury note or bill, a printed note or bill? There's no such thing.
Jim, I was laughing when he said that. I remember when my brother went off to Vietnam in 1968, and he had bought these treasury bills, and he said, every 6 months you cut off one of these and go down to the bank and they'll give you money. And I now I know what a coupon clipper was,
Yeah.
but until my brother went to Vietnam and I had to do that for him, I had no idea that that's how bonds were run.
And bearer bonds were the same way, and most bonds in the market were coupon clips. Find yourself a coupon clip or a paper bond anywhere.
Well, unless it's the old 30-year bonds that were out there, I don't know.
What about 100-year bonds now? What the heck? 30 years nothing.
Hey, Bill, I got an email from a listener that you forwarded on to me. The listener's name was James. And I'll try to condense it into a couple of questions, one for you and one for Jim. The first one's for you, Bill. If gold goes to $50,000 or higher to remedy the balance sheets of governments and central banks, how would that work to reflect the proper value of those holding U.S. dollars? Or would that simply create a situation where the cost of goods would be high and in short supply?
Well, $50,000 gold means that dollars that you have today, and let's say, just for round numbers, let's say gold's $1,000 an ounce, it would mean that dollars are valued at 2% in the future of what they are today. So, I mean, that would
almost Weimar?
Yeah, it would translate into a currency that, dropped 95+% in purchasing power. I mean, that would be the adjustment to dollar holders.
Boy, be careful what you wish for. Jim, the other part of his question was if the balance sheets have been repaired, in other words, we have $50,000, $87,000 gold an ounce, wouldn't this also give a backing to the dollars held, or would it be a combination with the U.S. dollar losing its reserve status? How would that look?
Let me back to the first question because
just
not to the answer. Bill, you have a beautiful answer, but to the question itself, the proper value of the dollar. What the dickens is that?
Yeah.
Okay, there is no such thing. So, the proper value of the dollar means your mindset's in the wrong place.
The proper value to the dollar is what, 371 grains of silver.
Well, that is according to you are right. That's according to the silver certificate. But this question was, what is the proper value of the dollar? In a much less technical sense, I think. I may be wrong.
Right. Yes.
But you have certainly answered that question correctly. The
question about if the balance sheets have been repaired, what's that going to look like, Jim? What does that mean? Our balance sheets are repaired. All of a sudden, our liabilities and on our assets are balanced. We may not have any equity, but we're balanced out. What does that really mean going forward then?
Start over, do over. It means early 1950s, when balance sheets weren't very big. Okay.
Do you think the jackasses will just get right back to loaning money or doing government bonds?
I think that they'll be so sliced and diced by that time they'll be non-functional. And I would hope that the public might wake up by the shock they went through. And I rather hope there may be a statesman around who would run for president, or if not, maybe the second coming is what we need. But this is a misunderstanding when you say the proper value. The dollar doesn't have itself a value outside of a marketplace, which now is supported because it's the only currency in the world that has a number before the decimal point on the interest return. I mean, and the number is so small, the support of the dollar via that is so small. The gold will be, as we've discussed many times, free gold. Prices will be made according to the physical markets. The future markets will be in total disarray and disgrace. The purchase of gold by China and Russia has nothing to do with speculating for a higher price. It has to do with a policy of control. And the policy of control is not so different than when the U.S. dollar really was king dollar, and we did control much of the world. The currencies of China and of Russia will be because of their gold holdings in significant demand. They'll go through problems just like everybody else. But keep in mind that China is, without any doubt, a Marxist country. Without any doubt. Nothing's changed except they want money, not property. Russia actually has been run rather well. It's small, but it's been run rather well as a country. And those allied with them will benefit from them. So when this is all done, our balance sheet will be tattered, but the potential for a recovery in the far future, let's not discount that completely. It only can take place on sound balance sheet basis. Just like if you're running a bakery, what's the difference? You don't have to be Einstein to understand this stuff. If the guy in the bakery has no money and no flour to bake with, he's going nowhere. The real question that I see is whether or not there'll ever be an honest accounting of the gold we are led to assume is at Fort Knox in the Federal Reserve or wherever. But the point here is, what is an accounting? You can't account for yourself. If it was nobody paying taxes because they'd all declare themselves broke. You can't check your own books. The thesis of accounting, which used to be the thesis of FASB before they sold their souls, was that only by an independent third party, not associated with the company involved, could the books, according to general accepted accounting practices, GAAP, be issued to the public and to be considered as reliable. And believe me, they've worked on that one just like they've worked on every other one in terms of statistics and figures. So the question here is, how do we prove to the satisfaction of anybody that we've got the gold?
Somebody better be auditing it, and somebody who is absolutely independent.
Government can't audit itself. Government controls every major auditing company there is. And, even when they took Arthur Andersen out on the Enron thing, nobody lost their job. They just went over, what they did was they had the same amount of people wanting to be audited and the same amount of auditing major companies, all of which were overstressed. So the other remaining big three, or big four now, took the employers of Arthur Andersen right in. So Arthur Andersen's name may have disappeared, but the machine still works. And I'm of the mind that the easiest thing to steal is what nobody can see. So if you're a politician, who had to convince the world of his statesmanlike character, but at the same time wanted to rip the country off, what would you steal? The gold. Not agents outlay, or not like Grant had an office for payoffs. Okay, you'd steal the gold. Why? Because nobody can ever see it. Nobody will ever know. Gold doesn't talk. Gold is quiet. Gold is secret. Many places to put gold around the world where secrecy exists. So the possibility that we've already been filched is extraordinarily high, because that is what you wouldn't do. This thing about the Clintons are really shady 101. The idea of a charitable fund as a cover for personal wealth is so old and so dumb that it almost shouldn't be mentioned.
And leaves a paper trail.
Everywhere. Okay? Everywhere, Bill. So what doesn't leave a paper trail? 2 o'clock in the morning, a garbage truck backed up to Fort Knox or wherever, loading up not with garbage, but with bars. What do? You get a nice zinc bar, or, for that matter, a brick, polish it, and then pray to gold. We're going to be in a very significant mess when China and Russia can say, we ask an independent government to audit our gold position. U.S. do the same.
David, this week I was off, and I did a lot of maintenance and checking up on all of our backup stuff. I do this every Labor Day weekend, and I think I've told you this before, Dave, but every time I top off the gas and the diesel and the propane tanks, and every time I go through the inventory of the backup supplies, I ask myself this question: just how bad is it going to be, and is all this preparation going to be enough? I mean, I've done a lot, but then I keep thinking, I got to do more. Dave, what goes through your mind when you're doing the same thing I'm doing?
You could never do enough because you don't know what's going to happen. You know, again, I hate to use the word hope because it's not really, it's not a part of the program. But when you look at what you're doing, you have to say to yourself, you can only do so much. And I'll use as an example, you can't prepare for every single thing that could go wrong because, as I try to say, everything's fluid. What you think today could change tomorrow. You know, we could have an alien invasion, a faked alien invasion, you know. And I say that half jokingly and half seriously because if you've looked at Dr. Stephen Greer's work, there's a high degree of probability that would be an excellent way to play the public to the ultimate max and cause things to take place that change the way we do business, such as when we talked before the conversation, Bill and I were talking about how 9/11 changed everything. It ripped up the Constitution of the United States. It sent the military on a $5 trillion spending binge. It just completely changed things you could not have anticipated the day before. Let's quote Condoleezza Rice. Who would have thought they would have used airplanes as attack weapons? I don't know. I mean, you were warned. You knew it was coming. I mean, you know. So, no, Denny, as we get into this, and I've had readers ask the question, well, you know, what can you do? Well, again, there's a lot of things you could do. It depends on to what degree do you want to go. How much do you want to disrupt your life? Again, there's things like second citizenships. You know, I don't know that it's available to all people. Again, it depends on what your means is. But, yeah, finding a safer place, such as Andorra. You know, the odds of things going different in Andorra than they are here are probably pretty great in that nobody even knows where Andorra is. So unless it has to deal with nuclear fallout from a World War III, it'd probably be a safe place to hide out. Does everybody have the means to move there? No. How much could people store for food and water? Again, the basics everybody should have. And when I say the basics, you know, you should have the ability to at least be able to ride out a month, because a month isn't that long. You know, I just watch people use credit cards and just keep stuffing that thing in the chip reader, and okay, here it is, the chip reader. What if one day the chip reader doesn't work? Do you have $5 grand, 10 grand, 2 grand, depending on what your means are, hanging around? Or as Bill would say, do you have scrap silver hanging around? So, you know, without getting into what is enough, that's a line each individual person has to try and figure out based on what their ability is and what their finances are. But at the very least,
the best you can do.
Exactly. Some of us have more resources
than others. Hurricane?
You know,
wouldn't it have been nice to have a day bag?
You're talking about surviving a hurricane, Jim?
Yeah, I'm saying you're not wasting your time doing this, okay? Mother Nature is not treating us well. We're not treating her well. So if the guy says, all right, prepper, who wants to be a prepper? Man, take a look at those pictures. Total devastation. No water, no food, no nothing.
Hey, guys.
And so wherever it comes from, you're not going to waste your time, Bill or David. The stuff, you will consume the stuff. The question is, how much stuff and how long?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
On the topic of 9/11, we talked about this before the call. Dave just mentioned, 9/11 changed the world forever. The Constitution was ripped up. Let's talk about that, because the fact that engineers, a U.S. university, which I didn't know until David mentioned, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, 2 months ago had their funding cut. I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. But the fact that a major university came out and said there's absolutely no way the official report could have happened, and the way I read it was that they reported that all of the structural supports had to have been pulled at the same time for the building to come down like that. I think we should talk about that because pretty much, and I can't say 100%, but pretty much everyone listening understands 9/11, and their friends, their family, everybody has thought that we're whack jobs. We're, conspiratorial tinfoil hats, and guess what? We're not. We've been right since that week and I remember talking with David that, the week after that. There's no way that it could have happened the way they said it happened.
Let me set it up this way, Bill. I'm going to go right to Dave. Dave, in my desk drawer, I keep a copy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I go back and I read it every so often. I took government classes in high school back in the 60s, and I truthfully do not know how some of the candidates for president right now can be spewing what they're spewing. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, all have been routinely denigrated publicly, and certainly from the Patriots Act post 9/11, we have been obliterating our Bill of Rights. But when so many candidates and people in the press that I find totally scary are routinely denigrating the very basis of our Constitution, Dave, I think 9/11 was the beginning of more and more trouble in the erosion of those Bill of Rights.
All right, well, let's start at the top just for listeners. I've sent in for post the story about the University of Alaska study, so you could look at it yourself. The whole study will be out within the next month or two, but I've sent in enough information that you could scan it and come to the conclusion that, like us tinfoil hat knuckleheads have said for almost 19 years, 18 years, whatever it is, that the story can't be true. That being said, you could review it yourself and come to your own conclusions. As to what's going on in the United States, again, you have to take 9/11 and you have to go back to the Patriot Act was written prior to 9/11. It was already written. It was sitting in a desk drawer.
That's a fact.
That's a fact. Look it up. I'm not going to post the information. Look it up. It was sitting in a desk drawer. Everything is planned in advance. There are no coincidences. The Patriot Act was pulled out of the desk, and every congressman and senator was told to sign it or else. That's when, if you remember, there was a Senator Wellstone who wouldn't sign it. His plane crashed, and he died. And that's when there was a Vermont senator who didn't want to sign it, and he got an anthrax letter. People could think what they want to think, but the bottom line is Building Number 7, which this study covers, could not have collapsed in its footprint by office fires. So getting back to where we're going with this, the country doesn't exist as we've been brought up to believe. Denny, you sent me something a while back about how we have all been indoctrinated into, and yes, that is correct. We've been indoctrinated into a thought process that is not correct. Most people do not know how to think, which is why we could have congressmen and senators saying things that are directly against the Constitution. We can have things taking place that are directly against the Constitution, and they don't get called out by the news media. The fact that when you get this article that's up for post, look at it, go to your favorite website search engine, and Google this article, DuckDuckGoose it, Dogpilot, whatever you want to use, and you will find that not one major news media organization has covered it.
You won't even find that article under Google.
Okay, so my whole point being is when everything the American public knows is a lie, our job will have been complete. And that's a famous quote that was said by a CIA chief, and again, you can look it up yourself if you're not familiar with it. The TV is the best brainwashing tool in the world. It has done its job perfectly.
You know, Dave, you make a good point. I consider the news media the propulsion system. Bill, that 7-hour CNN circus we watched this last week about climate change was absolutely stunning. The candidates' words were of such poor perspective and so lacking in facts, let alone wisdom. It was scary. Everybody's going to drive an electric car. We're all going to buy back your gas-powered vehicles. Food animals, cattle, and pigs are a major cause of global warming and should be destroyed. Everything should be free. Everything needs to be controlled by the government. We're giving up our freedoms for safety. Bill, Lord help us if these people ever get back in control of our lives.
I can't even add to your question. I mean,
can I jump in quick?
Go ahead.
Just perspective. I have also sent in for post the article that I brought up last week about Dr. Mann and Dr. Ball's lawsuit, and the whole graph that the IPCC protocol is based on is a fraud. And I'm not going to get into whether people do or don't believe in climate change. The planet's been changing since the day it was formed. But the basis of the IPCC is the hockey stick graph, which has been proven. The graph is not accurate. It is a fraud. The real graph shows a warming period in the 15th century followed by a mini ice age, and there's a copy of that graph also in the article that I'm sending in for posting. So we don't have to get into long explanations here because time is short. I've sent the information in. You can look at it for yourself. Do your own research from there. Bill, I didn't mean to step on you,
no,
but I
kind of...
No, not at all.
I mean, I couldn't add to Denny's question. Denny gave the answer in the question by saying, Lord, help us all.
There's an agenda. I'm not sure what's going – I am sure. I'm not going to tell everybody. Jim and I know what's going on. I hope Bill and Denny do too. But there's a plan, and the plan doesn't include you. George Carlin said it best. It's a big club. It's a
and
big
you're
club.
not in it. You ain't in it. I'm glad we can laugh. Jim, let me
does that
go ahead.
Sum it up? I sent you enough information.
Yeah. I think the whole point that Bill wanted to bring up was, doggone it, look, this study has come out. We're going to probably hear the end of University of Fairbanks as far as their engineering people. You know, this is, God bless them for being patriots.
Have you heard one word from mainstream media about
not
that?
one.
Not one word.
Yeah. It's the propulsion system for lies.
How do you land a building in the foundation if it isn't done that way?
You don't.
You
can't do it.
Common sense.
Jim, while you're talking, we received a question from a fellow by the name of Charles, and he talks about transactions after the reset to gold. I'm going to try to paraphrase it as I see it from him. After the reset starts, how do we repatriate gold into other assets such as real estate, stocks, bank accounts? In other words, the government isn't stupid. And I think what Charles is anticipating is a large windfall tax on gold transactions, dollar limits of transactions, or even outright confiscation. So the question is, what is life after the reset transactionally going to look like as we reassimilate our gold back into society?
The entire thesis is back to basics, okay? Most questions about what the day after will look like are answered by historically what existed, like barter and it still exists in Alaska and in many other states in Vermont. You know, it's not unheard of that you can barter something. Do you really want your gold back? Do you really want to exchange it for whatever they call currency in excess of what you need to pay your bills? The answer is that you're making a judgment about gold in the present world and the present circumstances, none of which will exist after the second reset. And the future of society depends on the establishment of statesmen, or I guess today states ladies, and people who like Truman. You come in from business, and when you leave, you can call a taxi cab, and you got your little suitcase. You walk out of the White House. So my feeling is that the question has a bad premise. Charles is asking a question based on what he sees outside his window right now. I don't think you're going to want to exchange your gold for anything else than whatever is your necessaries.
That is exactly what needs to be said.
Wherever you have to go, because you'll be able to, if you have made a good stockpile in something now worth so much in currency. So I don't think, Charles, you got that worry, unless you think the world tomorrow is going to look like the world today, which it will not. That's my answer.
That's a good answer. You hold on to your gold until you need transactions to maintain lifestyle or whatever, but hold on to it because it's the basis of your wealth.
But even lifestyle doesn't count. Life counts.
Life.
Okay? That's what we're looking at here. Lifestyle is what got us into this trouble. Beating the Joneses, okay, got us into this trouble. Ferraris got us into this trouble. And this whole thing is back to basics. That's the answer, logically, that can be given. And bear in mind one point I made, which may have gone over lightly, but if you were in power, and you didn't want anybody ever to know what you stole, what would you steal? That which nobody ever can account for legitimately. Gold.
And our gold has not been accounted for since the 1950s.
And even then, was it legitimately counted? And look at the characters that have run our country since then. I mean, some of our presidents have stolen bath towels and furniture from Lincoln's bedroom, and the government had to go with moving vans to get the stuff back. They wouldn't take gold. Are you nuts?
Bill,
it's very important.
Yeah, I've only got a couple more questions, one for Bill and one for Jim. Bill, I'll do yours first. I saw the piece you posted about Alan Greenspan's comments about investors and hard assets. Greenspan used to be one of the first gold bugs. He was romantically involved with Ayn Rand, and he went over to the dark side. But now he's talking about hard assets and investors. Bill, how soon before the herd mentality of investing world rediscovers hard assets like what Greenspan was discussing?
That's impossible to answer. I mean, what you're asking is, on what day do they flip the light switch?
No, it's more perspective. What will it trigger to get the rest of the world? That we're like zebras, and
the rest of the world already, for the most part, gets it. Demand for physical gold and silver is coming from the rest of the world. I can tell you, in North America, the retail trade has been a net seller for close to a full year. People are actually selling their metal.
They're impatient and they're worn out. That doesn't mean that they're right.
And they're looking at it as, I could break even. I'm going to sell it. I made 20%. I'm going to sell it. You're right. People got burned out, and they don't understand what they own or why they owned it in the first place.
Oh, that's so sad. Jim, last question. Yeah, last question, Jim. It came from Gene, one of our listeners, and he asked us to talk about propping up the bond market to improve the yield curve, the massive swings in the metals, and finally China's move to pump 600 billion yuan along with a rate cut. I think he's trying to put all those things together about propping up the bond market.
He's looking for a solution.
I don't know if he's looking for a solution. He wants us to talk about it because he's not able.
If you could do the implications of those moves are, then the great scare that's going around about an imminent worldwide recession to a significant degree would be removed. The way out of a negative yield curve is good business, but that's a contradiction because of the effect that picture is giving of the credit markets.
Wait a minute, Jim. You mean the way I lose weight is to stop eating so much?
Oh, no, it tends to happen. I'm 55 pounds lighter, and I think that's what happened. Okay.
So good business is the way you prop up your bond market. Amen.
That's it. Good demand for money props up your bond market, and demand for money comes from higher economic activity. This is not rocket science.
Guys, what I think he's missing in that question is the bond markets all across the world are, quote, propped up. I mean, is there any way interest rates could have gone negative just based on pensions, corporations, individuals buying bonds? No, it was done directly by central banks. I mean, if the Treasury auctions $25 billion worth of paper today and another 25 tomorrow, and for the week it's $100 billion, who is going to step up with $100 billion to buy that? The only entity on the planet that can do it, or is willing to do it and can do it, is the Federal Reserve. And they print the money to do it. It's not like they have an extra $100 billion. I mean, they don't even have. Last I looked, the equity that the Federal Reserve had was $65 billion. That's their equity, and everything else is levered off of that.
And I don't believe that equity anyway, because most of that asset side is pumped up subprime bonds and all the other garbage that no other bank wants.
Well, what's the biggest asset that the Treasury holds? Student loans. I mean, what kind of an asset is a student loan? From somebody.
There are 21 candidates that want to remove it by forgiveness and Jubilee.
Yeah, exactly. Wipe it out. Wipe out the student
Jubilee.
debt. Wipe out medical debt. What they're forgetting is any time they wipe something out on one side, it's wiped out on the other side. And the other side, it happens to be an asset that people actually, earn interest each month or every 3 months or 6 months on.
Well, the ignorance that is being spewed by the candidates for president everywhere is beyond belief. I mean, they really don't. I honestly believe they haven't a clue.
I could be entirely wrong. I interviewed with Greg Hunter yesterday. It'll be posted late, I guess, midnight tonight or thereabouts. And we talked a little bit about the upcoming election. And I gave the opinion that I think of the 23 candidates, I guess it's 20 now, 2 or 3 have dropped out, of the current candidates, not one of them will be the nominee. It will be someone else. That's just my opinion.
You're talking about on the Democrat side?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's fact. That doesn't sound too out of order to me, Bill, at all, because of the stuff they're saying.
Well, guys, that's all I have. I'll start with you, Bill. Have you got anything else that you want to share before we turn them loose?
I would just say that the most important thing that happened this week is that us lunatics have, again, been proven not to be lunatics with the study by engineers on 9/11. I think that's very, very important, and I hope that it somehow, some way gets a push and the public does, open their eyes to it.
We have been shouted down as conspiracy theorists for so long, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't a conspiracy. They had to impugn those who even recognized the possibility of something that was too criminal to even process. And for those who have ridden that horse from the very beginning, and I wasn't on it from the very beginning, but I did start to recognize it. But the only way you get people to shut up is you impugn them, ridicule them.
I had people that would stick their fingers in their ears and say, no, I'm not hearing you, I'm not listening.
Those were probably family members.
Yeah, our government would never do that.
Yeah. How about you, David? Have you got anything else?
No, I just add, I'm going to post both articles. Read them, think about what they're saying, and then think about it in relation to what we talk about. Because, again, I'm not anti-American. This goes on in every country. I just happen to be here working in this one at the time. So you ask me questions, and I try to answer them as honestly as I can. And like Bill, I keep waiting for my phone to ring to say, holy shit, Dave. Oh, after all these years, you're not crazy. You were right from day one. So that being said, you could read the articles and include what you want from both of them. There's nothing to add to them. I think they speak for themselves, and I think they turn everything the world ever thought upside down, finally, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've proven fact on both of them yet again.
Keep your phone on, Dave. I'll call you after the call. I'll tell you.
Well, if you're going to call Dave, you got to have a soup can and an awful long string to the Dave soup can. Okay.
What's the old joke? Just because we're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't out to get us anyway.
Exactly.
Exactly.
A little paranoia is very, very healthy.
Yeah. All right, Jim. Take it home. Have you got anything else for us?
I think today we've covered stuff that it's like a textbook that can be read and understood. I do hope that listeners listen again, not only to new stuff, but you ever heard of a recorder? There was so much meat by Bill and Dave that I learned just by being in their company, and I'm honored by that. That's my statement.
That's real kind, and it's the real deal.
Jim.
All three of you guys are really amazing. Thanks for doing what you're doing, and thanks for being willing to be called crazy, because you're not. Yeah. Well, I guess that's it. That's it for us, Bill.
All right, guys. I'll get it posted. Have a great weekend.
You
Enjoy,
too.
and I love this, okay? I see you next Saturday.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.